In my previous video, I had mentioned how rationalist scholar Iravati Karve chose to strip away the fantastic elements surrounding the birth of the Pandavas and instead pin their birth down to Niyoga. She argued that due to changing moralities and unfavorable stance of several lawmakers on Niyoga, the original contents of the epic were probably altered. As a result, the Pandavas were shown to have supernatural births. So, what is the truth about the Pandavas' birth? How were they actually born? What does the epic actually tell us? These are the questions for which we will seek answers in today's video. But before that, a quick recap of the story so far. Hello friends, welcome to the fabulous world of stories and why we tell them from Culture Katha. When Queen Satyavati came to know that Dhritarashtra was born blind, she was very upset. She desired a valid successor to the Kuru throne, a child who would be fit in all respects to be ruler. Thus, Pandu was born. Although born with a possible skin or health condition, he was crowned king and was groomed suitably to take over the reins of the Kuru kingdom from its caretaker Bhishma. Pandu proved to be an illustrious descendant of the Kuru family. He, under the able guidance of Bhishma, managed to establish the dominance of the Kuru kingdom over its neighbors. He even subdued several smaller kingdoms and annexed them to the Kuru kingdom. When Pandu reached marriageable age, Bhishma got him married to Kunti and Madri. Pandu spent many happy years in their company, but alas, as a result of what seemed a curse on the Kuru royal family, he too remained childless. The epic tells us that shortly afterwards, Pandu retired to the forests with his two wives after handing over the kingdom to his blind brother Dhritarashtra. Surprisingly, the epic is silent on the reason behind his sudden decision to retire to the forests. Was he advised to spend more time with his wives far from the pressures of running a kingdom so that he could father children on them? Maybe. If indeed that was the idea behind Pandu moving to the forests, sadly it was not to be. His dreams of having strong and powerful sons who would succeed him was terminated by a tragic incident that happened in the forest. But it so happened that on one fateful day when he was out hunting, he happened to kill a deer and a doe when they were in the act of mating. Now, according to the dharma of those days, it was perfectly fine for a king to kill deer either for pleasure or for his food. But to kill a being, any being, while it was engaged in the act of love, was considered a sin. And Pandu had committed that sin. Sadly for Pandu, it turned out that the deer that was killed was actually a sage who had taken the form of a deer to pleasure the doe. The dying sage, who knew dharma, cursed Pandu that just as he, the sage, was killed in the act of love-making, Pandu too would die the moment he touched a woman with desire in his mind and lust in his heart. Hearing this, Pandu was heartbroken. He was not just going to be denied the ordinary pleasures a human being desires, but he was also going to deny the Kuru clan worthy descendants and Hastinapur an heir to the throne. Extremely saddened by this incident, Pandu decided to give up all his royal pleasures and luxuries and decided to live the life of an ascetic. His wives Kunti and Madri joined him in the forest to support him through his difficult times. Although Pandu had reconciled himself to his fate, his childlessness continued to bother him. So one day he approached Kunti, his first wife, and suggested the idea of Niyoga to her. He urged her to find a worthy Brahmin who roamed the forests and bear Pandu a child through Niyoga. But Kunti, as we have already seen, rejected the idea. She had a different plan. She then went on to tell him how sage Durvasa had once visited her father's kingdom and, pleased with her services, had given her a boon. According to the boon, she could summon any devata or god from the heavens who would then grant her a child. Hearing this, Pandu got all excited and wanted Kunti to try the mantra to see if it worked. Of course, unknown to Pandu, a young and curious Kunti had already tried out the mantra by invoking the deity Surya, and Karna had been born. Saddled with a child that she didn't want and couldn't have, young unmarried Kunti had abandoned the child in a river. The full implications of her act would come back to haunt her in future, as we shall find as the story unfolds. Anyway, looping back to our current story, Pandu, desiring a son, asked Kunti to invoke Dharma, the justice keeper of the world. According to the epic, Dharma descended from the heavens and, taking a physical form, united with Kunti. And thus, Yudhishthira, the son of Dharma and the eldest of the Pandavas, was born. Pandu was overjoyed. Having tasted the joy of parenthood, he now wanted more. So Kunti invoked Vayu, the strong and powerful wind god, and Bhima was born. It is said that once when Kunti was cradling the newborn Bhima on her lap, he slipped from her lap, fell down, and broke the mountain he fell on into 100 pieces. Such was the enormous strength of his body. After Bhima was born, Arjuna, with the blessings of the king of gods Indra, was born too. When Arjuna was born, the whole world rejoiced. All the gods in heavens gathered to shower blessings on the newborn. The epic gives the birth of Arjuna greater importance than the birth of Bhima or Yudhishthira by building greater drama around it. Why? Were there any special reasons for this? We'll explore the answers to this question sometime later into our story. Now, coming back to our story, Pandu managed to acquire 3 sons through Kunti, and subsequently 2 more sons, Nakula and Sahadeva, were born with the blessings of the Ashwini twin gods to Madri, with whom Kunti had shared her mantra. Thus, with the help of Kunti's mantra, Pandu managed to get 5 wise, strong and powerful sons who could one day rule the Kuru kingdom. Here, I would like to point out a couple of interesting aspects that come up. According to the epic, when Kunti invoked the sacred mantra for the first time, Dharma arrived in person and Kunti united with the Devata to conceive the child. The epic clearly states this. But subsequently, for Bhima and Arjuna, and of course for Nakula and Sahadeva, the epic merely says that Kunti and Madri obtained them through the respective Devatas. It does not clearly specify a physical union between Kunti or Madri with the Devatas when describing the birth of Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula and Sahadeva. The fussiness of this detail in the epic has led many people to believe that the Pandavas were born without the direct involvement of any male. Or in other words, they had a divine birth like the Immaculate Conception of Jesus Christ. This idea is called parthenogenesis, where a female egg can develop into a full-fledged embryo without the need for a sperm. This idea cannot be dismissed as mythical and preposterous. In fact, in the living world, several insect species and some reptiles are also known to reproduce through parthenogenesis. Whether Vyasa deliberately meant to underplay the birth details of the Pandavas, or whether he chose to give them a supernatural birth in order to heighten their status as the chief protagonists of the epic, is something that can be debated forever. But we do get a clue as to how the Pandavas were born from a conversation between Kunti and Pandu. After the birth of Arjuna, when Pandu asks for more children from Kunti, she admonishes him, saying that it was wrong of him to expect a fourth son from her, as the world would then label her promiscuous. And if she had a fifth son, she would be called a courtesan. This argument of Kunti does not make sense if there is no act of sex involved. So, in all likelihood, Vyasa meant the Pandavas to be born through the physical union of Kunti and Madri with the Devatas, including Dharma, Vayu, Indra, and the Ashwini twin gods, who had taken up human forms for this purpose. Well, whether we believe in the divine birth of the Pandavas through the Devatas, or we assume implied niyoga, as scholar Iravati Karve had pointed out, one thing is certain: the epic provides no firm basis for parthenogenesis. Friends, stay with me on this epic journey as we explore more cases of divine birth in world culture, and also take a look at some books and movies that have been inspired by the idea of parthenogenesis and niyoga in my next video. Till then, it's Tara, bye bye, take care.
Hi.